everybody, welcome back to my channel. I have not really been able to post a whole lot of content because I've been out at my parents' estate in Texas. Hopefully you saw a couple of those videos from our time out there. And we just drove back recently, and we're wrapping up school with the kids, so things have been pretty hectic. But I'm excited to share a conversation I had today with my really good friend and neighbor, Rachel Pitzel. She hosted this conversation on her IG platform, IG Live, and we will be trying to do these conversations about once a week, so you should check them out on a variety of topics. Today's also the day that my latest ebook was released, Race, Class, and Parenting, 5 Strategies for Discussing Social Injustice with Your Kids. So just excited to share this conversation I had with Rachel about how to be an ally, and I also had a couple of considerations for people who want to empower their friends who are allies. Thanks.
Hi guys, thanks for joining. Hi Mimi, I was just saying.
Hello.
It's mom peditor, right?
Yes,
like competitor. Okay.
Right.
It's in my brain. Hi from New Hampshire. I was just saying hi to everybody, welcoming them, and obviously we'll be having people joining us a little bit. You look gorgeous.
As do you.
Yes. So just so you guys who don't know, Mimi lives directly across the way from me. So
I could probably wave to you.
Right.
You could probably see me through the window.
Right. And then just a refresher, if you guys are new or didn't attend last week. So Mimi and I last year were just talking about starting a YouTube series, just talking about different things with parenting. And basically she's a professor and an author and just has such unique experiences and is really a great person to facilitate conversation. So that's where this came in. And then for a couple of things that happened along the way, we were just able to start last week. But I just want you guys to know that each week we're going to be visiting different subjects. So if there's specific things you want us to cover, I was thinking about doing homeschooling next week because Mimi is currently homeschooling one of her children.
Not just COVID homeschooling,
very different COVID. Yes. But yeah, so today Mimi wants to talk about allyship. And for this specific conversation, Mimi's really going to take the lead because I'm learning. So
yeah, no, well, that's fine. I mean, I think it's important to even think about what the word allyship means for you. I saw in the promo that you did such a great job, beautifully articulating what it meant. So I don't know if you want to repeat that to give everybody some context.
Well, and then it's funny because I re-recorded that 6 times because I'm am I saying it the right way? To me, allyship is when you're somebody who's not necessarily in a group, but you want to support their cause and really just learn about it and be able to stand up for other people. And I feel like that you can be an ally for so many different types of things, but specifically right now we're talking about a very specific, conversation.
I think that was perfect and beautifully stated. So that's why I just wanted to give you the opportunity to say it again. I think, I wanted to talk through today, a couple of different considerations for being an ally. If you're interested in pursuing allyship, obviously we've had so much going on in our society that has really brought to light what's going on with racism and systemic racism in the United States. And I think a lot of people are motivated in an unprecedented way to be an ally or to enhance their allyship. So I think it's great to talk about, how to frame this.
Right. And I think we're learning, a friend of mine brought up something called plantation capitalism, which I'd never heard of. So I think we're learning about a lot of different things right now. And, I think what I love about you is how well you're able to communicate things in a really safe space and give people an opportunity to be where they are and then grow from there. And speaking of that, Mimi's new book is out today. Yay! Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it is the second book in a series called Race, Class, and Parenting. So about 4 years ago, I formed this group called Race, Class, and Parenting, and I was holding different kinds of panel sessions for women. It was really, for me, an intersectional feminist intervention. I just really wanted to get all different kinds of women together to have conversations about social identities and parenting and, some of the other things that really concern us as women that we don't often talk about, especially across racial lines. But I just realized I have such a really diverse friend group, and part of that is because of the experiences that I've had growing up. And, I was just I just need to get everybody in a room together and we can have these conversations. And I always joke and say that as I was thinking about it, I'm this is either going to be amazing or I'm going to collapse my social network in one afternoon. We're just going to see what happens. but it was really fantastic. And, many years ago, you were even a panelist for my conversation on mompreneurship. So again, this is something that, it may not seem directly related to, conversations about race and class, but to me, it really is, because I think entrepreneurship really flies in the face of patriarchy. So, like
100%. And I will say one of the things I've loved is seeing different companies now saying that they're going to support, because there are so few female founded like tech companies, but then to see like women of color and people of color, it's even less so. So that is something that's come out that I really enjoy.
So today, like I said, I really want to focus on considerations, but the book that is released really is kind of partnered with the conversation we had last week about how to talk about social injustice with your kids. And so I have 5 strategies, or 5, pretty serious considerations if you're going to engage in these conversations with your children. And I think I am approaching it probably a little bit differently than a lot of people. So I suggest that people just check it out, just for, again, even with race, class, and parenting, the whole thing is I just want a marketplace of ideas for people to pull from and figure out what works for them and what works for their families. But, in the frameworks that I've discussed, even something like the Sesame Street town hall that they did, there were some challenges with that for me. The way that the conversation was presented. So I think, again, just, other ideas and other ways of thinking about it so that you can be super effective in your goals with your children. And especially depending on, if you're raising, what kind of children you're raising in this world. So.
Right. And I think that's one thing that we talked about yesterday was just, when you're sleep training your child, there's so many ways to do it. And when you're parenting, there's so many ways to do it. So there's no one way to do things. And so a lot of times you have to read a few things and see what resonates most with you. And sometimes that evolves and changes over time. And so I think what you said is really great. Sometimes you don't read one book, you read many. And so I definitely think that's a great thing. And I also love your price point. That's great.
Oh, yeah. That's the whole idea. It's something that I want to be widely accessible to everybody. So yeah, that's the second book. The first one is just general strategies if you want to parent from a stronger social justice perspective. But the one that I released today on Amazon, Race, Class, and Parenting, specifically 5 strategies for discussing social injustice with your children.
Love that. Amazing. And I will be sharing that in stories after this conversation too.
Okay. So yeah, like I said, today, if you want to be an ally, and then even a couple of considerations for people who want to support or empower their allies. So things to think about and ways to, kind of frame this idea. So the first one is similar. Like, I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record on this, but if you want to be an ally, you really need to understand your why. Why is it that you want to be an ally? Why are you engaged in this conversation or wanting to engage in this conversation on race in particular in this situation? That's what we're talking about. Why does this matter to you? Why does it matter to your family? What is the vision of your community that you believe in, your society that you believe in, and who do you feel like you are in bringing this about? So I think this is really, really important, because you won't be in an authentic pursuit unless you really understand why. And it's a conversation that you need to have with yourself, spend some time reflecting on it, and come to, that meaningful conclusion for yourself.
And that was another thing. So last week you shared that, and I did do a lot of reflection, and then my husband and I spoke a lot about that. So I love that you kind of set that precedent, because it took me a few days to kind of really figure out what that meaning was, and really reflecting on, just some background and stuff. So thank you.
Yeah. So I just, like I said, for everybody out there who wants to embark on this journey, and no matter who you are or what you are trying to align, what movement you're trying to align yourself with, I think that's a really important question. And it shouldn't, and like I said, part of that answer has to be about a certain view of the world that you believe in, that you want to bring about. And part of it has to be, just about yourself and who you want to be, and being like, for me, I'm really passionate about living my values. So, really understanding like, what are my values, and am I acting and behaving in alignment with the things that I say that I believe in? So just want to put that out there for the first thing for everybody to consider, reflect on, think about. The second consideration is like becoming an ally, or especially because I frame everything in the context of parenting. If you say you want to parent to your intentions and have a stronger social justice perspective or become an ally to a particular community, you really have to respect that this is a practice like a yoga practice. It's not like you're going to jump into this and, I don't go to one yoga class and then suddenly I'm a yogi. It's really a total like lifestyle shift. Like what you're saying is this is becoming kind of a religion. I think about that Bob Marley, love is my religion kind of thing. It is something that is an ongoing daily practice that you are going to make imperfect progress on a regular basis. So, you don't expect that, to go into, like I said, into a yoga practice and you're going to have a perfect performance every day when you get into that endeavor. It is going to take work. Your body is going to be different. It's going to be communicating with you differently on any given day. So it's not going to be the same day to day, but over time you will see that you will progress. And so for me, I was a professional soccer player. And when I was in college, it's funny because our athletic trainer was like, Mimi, you have the tightest hamstrings of anybody I've seen in 25 years. Like that was it. Like extremely tight. I'm really tall. I'm 6 feet tall. And I would just tell them, I'm like, look, my hamstrings are already stretched to their limit just for me to like, it's like, this is it. They're stretched out. But, in taking up yoga much later in my life, I think I was like probably close to 30 when I started taking yoga. I saw that I was able to gain a lot more flexibility, but it was a practice. So sometimes were great days, sometimes were bad days, sometimes I'm just there just to be there,
Totally. Sometimes you're like, this is just, I showed up, I want a medal.
Right. So, I think that also can encourage people and take away a little bit of the intimidation of the idea of engaging in something like this. So that, I think that's kind of what I want to share too, that's another consideration. You are not expected to jump into this and be an expert. You are just kind of committing yourself to forging a pathway and approaching things with humility and opening up your mind and opening up your heart. Like that's what it is that you are saying that you want to do.
Yeah. And another analogy, since you brought up the yoga thing, because I've been doing yoga off and on since I was like 15, sometimes you haven't done it for a while and then you come back and you also have to appreciate, you were saying, your body responds differently, but sometimes you have to, as parents, we go through different things, especially with our children. And so maybe things are a little bit less of a focus at one point. Yes. And then so being kind to ourselves when we come back to things, I think is also,
100%. I think that's the whole thing. If we want this to be sustainable, that's the way that we have to think about it. That's one kind of analogy. You can even look at something like thinking about weight loss, something like that. So it's like, you have to know kind of why. If you know why you want to do it, it's more likely that you're going to be able to sustain what it is that you're doing. Even if you like kind of get off and you miss a day of exercise or if you eat a dessert, it doesn't derail your entire process. It is a process of pursuing a healthier lifestyle.
Right.
So that's kind of how I want people to think about it. The other consideration that I have, the third one, is just really understanding the paradox of your position and striving for greater balance. So wherever we are aligning ourselves with a group that is a minority group, it's there's a little bit of a paradox embedded in that. So if you think about empowerment, I am a women's empowerment scholar. That was like my research interest was women's empowerment. And empowerment is about ability and capacity, those two things together. Like you're able to do something and you have the capacity to do the things you want to do. Like you have the ability to do the things you want to do and you have the capacity. And what's kind of interesting in this situation where we are allies, we don't really have ability because that ability would come from personal experience and knowledge, but we have a lot of capacity. All right. So, there's a little bit of an imbalance there. And I think, generally speaking, this is something that we have to be sensitive to. You may have more of a platform or things may be centered toward your position. And so it's really kind of important for you to continue to pursue a more balanced situation where your ability or your knowledge, your understanding kind of matches in the capacity that you have because you are in the majority group for whatever the specific social identity is. So, I can look at myself as someone, where if I am considering differently abled populations. Like
Right.
I am, I don't have special needs in that way, but I have more capacity to actually, I have capacity to be able to leverage and influence because I, belong to the majority in this situation. But in order to balance that capacity, I really need to try to immerse myself to have a deeper understanding, a better understanding, an authentic understanding, so that I can be a really good ally and advocate for, people that I care about that are, from a minority group in whatever, like I said, social identity it is.
Right. And so what is one of the best strategies you think for doing that? Just in terms of, like, last week you talked about, reaching out to certain people. Is it a combination? Obviously, like we Google things.
Right.
But I think it's really helpful to read different types of things. So what's your suggestion there?
Yeah, I think something, again, kind of a little bit of a broken record, but it really is making sure that you have significant exposure and that you have multiple narratives of the particular group that you are talking about. And especially coming from a mothering perspective, I want to make sure that my children have that kind of exposure and they see people in many different roles in their lives. So you take something like being differently abled, for example. We had a tutor who had who was differently abled. And I thought that was really important. She had kind of a physical disability.
Right.
And I wanted my children to be able to understand that you can learn from, see this mentor. Just because they have this lack of capacity in one way, that doesn't define who they are. There's still value. You should still look up to
Right.
a person in this position. And so that was something that, like, for me, it just was kind of fortunate that the opportunity came up for me to have somebody
Right.
in that role, to have somebody in that
Right.
role in children's lives.
Right. And that was when I was looking for a tutor for Grayson for dyslexia, I was really wanting a male because so many of the teachers, especially for elementary school, are female. And I just wanted him to be able to have that connection. And that makes so much sense. I love that. The other thing you were saying, you said something about how when you're differently abled, you still have all these different capacities. I think also, and what I've learned with Grayson, is that a lot of times when you have a challenge in one area, you have so much ability in other areas. And so a lot of times it's hard to kind of understand that. But that's also too where, like, sometimes you can kind of push it down, like, oh, this person looks a certain way or whatever that is. And to remember that, when I was in college, I did a lot of work with the Braille Institute in La Jolla, and I was literally blown away because this was one of my first experiences there. But they would do art projects in this classroom, and I'm not good at art. Just very well known. I'm creative. I'm not good at art. They would do these self-portraits, and they would look just like them, and just incredible projects. And I was so blown away because they can't see. But that they had other senses that were so strong, so they would touch their face, and they were just showing me some different things. So it was just, I think that is what you said, so helpful. And so thank you for that.
Last week I thought we had a couple of glitches because I was far away, but literally I'm like, I'm right here.
Okay, so you finished 3, so 4 now, right?
4, yeah. So I'm thinking, I've seen a little bit of literature and a little bit of a movement where people are kind of talking about how one shouldn't be just an ally, but you should be anti-racist. And I think, like, I agree with the spirit of what's being said. I think what's communicated through that is that not a passive kind of endeavor, if that makes sense. A few years ago, my pastor at my church was explaining that it's really more important to think about what you're for than what you're against. And I always thought that was really wise insight. Focus on what it is that you're for rather than what you're against. So again, similar to that kind of analogy that I brought up about, like, rather than being like anti-fat, it's more important to be kind of like pro-healthy lifestyle. So I just, for me, I like to frame things in the way of what it is that we are pursuing. And I think that that's a little bit more of a constructive approach for me. I think that being anti-ignorance, I had said, would allow me to passively judge, which is different than being like pro-education, which kind of motivates me and inspires me and holds me accountable to, like, furthering a particular narrative. Does that make sense?
Right. No, it totally does.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's literally just in language. I mean, we
Right.
were just having this conversation about some other things, but I think also what you were saying is when you say things like, I'm, let's say it's talking about like weight loss. I think sometimes you can say, well, I'm anti these things, but if I'm pro health, well, health can be a lot of different ways and it can
Right.
look a lot of different ways.
Right. Right. And like I said, so you don't just default to just judging and condemning. I'm anti-racist, that's racist, that's racist. It's different than, I am pro-education. I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and like become active and actively pursue, you know, in bettering myself and also bettering others in my community. If that makes sense.
100%. I love that. I love how you explain that too.
All right. So the fifth consideration for a would-be ally is just simply that allyship is not for the faint of heart. Okay, and so I think, sometimes if you have an assertive personality, you don't even really realize that that is a form of privilege in and of itself. Like everybody has different personalities. It takes more or less work to be able to assert yourself in different situations. As a mom, you're a mom. I have two different kids with really different personalities. And I've got
Right.
one who's a complete spitfire, and you better not ever, you better not ever. And then I've got, another one who's like a little bit slower to speak up for himself. So it's been about negotiating the weaknesses for them in different ways. So I think that for yourself as an ally, that is also, something that you're going to have to cultivate in yourself is just that assertion. And it's something that I take for granted. I've always been like this. Rachel, I remember when I was in the 4th grade, I actually organized a protest among my classmates around the issue of school bonds. And then when the principal shut it down and told us we couldn't protest, I literally stood up and quoted John Morley and told him, "You have not converted a man because you've silenced him." And this was the 4th grade. Okay. So I was just born this way. I was just born this way.
I just want you to know in the 5th grade, there was a new dress code that said that people weren't allowed to wear tank tops. And I think it was meant to be, this was like the late 80s, guys, okay?
Right.
So you remember the shirts with the long tank tops on the side? I think that's what the intent was, but it was overly, and I love tank tops. So I arranged a protest and we made signs and did the whole thing. So, and they changed the dress code. So, because it was, I think the language was wrong. The intent was something a little bit different, but yes.
So yeah, for sure. So that, I guess that, like I said, that's just to say that we're all coming with different kinds of personalities. It's something that you should reflect on for, how you're going to find yourself in this role as an ally. Where are your strengths? And again, what are some weaknesses that you may need to negotiate, or some things where, you may need to develop yourself further to be able to stand up and, again, live your values. Stand up for what it is that you say you believe in.
Right. I love that.
And then the 6th thing as being an ally, this is something that I think I talked about last week. It's in the book and it seems obvious, but it just doesn't seem obvious, which is that Black people are not a monolith. Okay. Black people are not a monolith. So what I mean by that is all Black people in the United States are not all the same social experience at all times. And so that's where I would offer a critique even over the Sesame Street special last week, is because, again, it's for children. So there's a bit of simplification that is necessary, but sometimes the oversimplification can be harmful because it puts us to just a single story. And I encourage everybody looking at or watching you watch the TED Talk on the danger of a single story. That's really, really important framework for understanding this before you begin to engage in this kind of allyship thing. So very well-intentioned people are at risk of only having a single narrative about the Black experience. And that's actually not going to be productive or helpful for all people of color or all Black people.
Right. Oh, interesting. That's fascinating. Will you share that TED Talk with me so that I can share it with in stories?
100%. I'm definitely looking forward to sharing it. And I think you just got to be careful because, again, racism really begins with stereotyping. It's really when we take a stereotype and we elevate it to have to be a causal factor with like a predictive capability. That's where I think that's, the birth of racism is really in stereotypes. So we have to really be careful about that and have a more sophisticated narrative about different people in our society. to avoid unintentional bigotry in different forms. And, it's kind of tough because I've been listening. Some people sent me like a video from Candace Owens. I don't know if you're too familiar with Candace Owens, but she is.
Became familiar with her not too long ago. Yes.
Yes, she is a person with a really big platform right now, and it's a little bit frustrating. And I've been trying to think through how to communicate the challenge that is coming out from her perspective. And I think I've come up with a metaphor that I think is helpful. Hopefully, it's helpful to everybody. Racism is almost kind of like having cancer. Okay, so if let's build it out in this kind of metaphor. And there are some of us whose cancer is basically in remission. Okay. So you might have had, there are many different kinds of cancer. It's a different experience if you have stage 1 cancer and it's caught early versus, stage 4, a very aggressive form of cancer. There's different kinds of, excess of having cancer. And so some people are not like active cancer patients. Some people are cancer survivors. And I think that what you have is almost like a racism survivor syndrome, where there's almost a denial of the existence of the problem, maybe for self-preservation or to maintain to avoid cognitive dissonance. But I look at myself as a person. In many ways, I have privileges that outweigh the disadvantage of my race and or my gender, whatever combination there is there. But just like cancer, I still have a perpetual vulnerability to racism. So I think that it's important to look at that. Like, not everybody is everybody's experiencing the same level of the problem. Some people, like I said, are kind of remission. It is not sensitive, or to me, it's kind of illogical to try to pretend that it doesn't exist once you're kind of past the stage of having, or being in the throes of treating yourself for this.
And I've seen this in some groups that I'm in and some communities that I'm in, like I think with Jews, I think that's a common experience where some people go so far the other direction.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's an amazing analogy.
Yeah, so and it's funny because I think what we see too are like people who would point at people and be like, well, look at her, she's fine, so cancer must not be that bad, or cancer must not exist. No. Just because somebody has survived, that doesn't mean that it isn't serious. It doesn't mean that it isn't deadly. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So I think, in the same way, that's kind of how we have to look at this conversation on race and racism and what it means to different people. And I think that for people who enjoy other kinds of privileges that can offset the vulnerability that's created by living in a racist society, we have to find a better leadership role and a different kind of insight.
So fascinating. Will you say that again? I love what you just said, because that's fascinating.
Just saying that there are some people who, through a combination of hard work and just good fortune, just good luck, you may find yourself on the other side of this experience, this metaphorical cancer. And I like that analogy too, because again, from a public health background, and what we say in epidemiology is that your genetics are like a loaded gun and the environment pulls the trigger.
Oh, right. Yes. Yes.
This is kind
I
of
have an autoimmune disease. I totally get that.
Right. So this is basically like a similar situation where you have this genetic profile based on whatever's going on in your life, your upbringing, other kinds of resources, other kinds of privileges that you have. It may not express fully as it would in someone else, but it would not make sense for me, someone else, condemn them, blame them for falling or for succumbing to this kind of illness. And in the same way, it would not make sense for me to turn and try to demean the character of a person who wasn't able to survive racism in the same way that I've been able to, like good fortune mainly, and also, through kind of legitimate strategies. So I think there should be a leadership role for people to play if you're finding, that the burden of racism is not the same as, the majority or as people who are having the hardest time. You really need to reflect on what is your role to play for those of us who have experienced some, like I said, such that would offset some of these disadvantages, it's really to try to find a leadership role in all of this, because we should be the ones leading with the greatest empathy and the greatest compassion for the people who, you know, have not been able to find a way to survive the burden that this places on individuals in our society.
Beautifully said. That was amazing. I think you need to write another book on this. The way that you explain this has been incredible and so insightful, and I feel like I have so much to think about, and I need to rewatch this because the way that you explain things, I just love the way that you talk about things, because you simplify very difficult, you know, very complicated subjects, but not in like an oversimplified way, maybe like the Sesame Street thing, which I have not seen yet.
Okay,
But thank you.
Like I said, it's still, to me, it's still kind of better than not to open up the conversation. So I don't want to be overly critical, but I just do think that there are new ways and more sophisticated ways that we should think about the delivery of this, especially to children. And so I just want to switch really quickly to, you know, kind of bridging what I just said to how is it that we can help empower people who want to be allies. And I think the first thing is we have to be cautious of over policing conversations. Because, you know, coming from this as a college professor, I know that I need to create a safe space for my students to learn, and they need to have the freedom to be wrong, because being wrong is part of learning.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay, I was saying, as long as we create an environment that is safe and respectful, people should be able to enter the conversation and, you know, approach things, ask questions, even if the questions are little bit naive, so that we can have the process of learning take place authentically.
I love that. That's so well said.
And the second
I'm starting
point,
to feel like, did you watch this last Bachelor? He was always like, I love that. I love that.
No,
I love that. I'm like, stop saying I love that.
oh my gosh. The second thing is kind of related to the first thing. This idea of creating that safe space for communication is really focusing on what are your objectives. We're trying to invite people into the conversation. We're trying to build constructive relationships. And, you know, I've been married for 13 years this year. And somebody told me very wisely, like, you could be married or you could be right all the time. Like, it's up to you. You can choose. You can choose if you want to be married, or you can choose if you want to be right all the time. And I think the point in that is that we are trying to build a relationship and trying to extend grace back and forth to one another. And that's part of the process of building out a real relationship. So I think that, you know, again, we have to give grace to the people who are engaging in the process and respect that starting where they are. And we are trying to, again, be constructive and be building and be supportive of that process.
I love that. And I also think it's important to know that sometimes we think we know such a full picture of things, and sometimes things are taken out of context. Sometimes it's harder to always know exactly what's going on, you know, when you see like tiny snippets of things. So I love the idea of extending grace. It's such a beautiful, beautiful way to say it.
So as I was saying, hopefully I will get a chance to post this as a YouTube video so everybody can see the full conversation take place a bit more smoothly. But the final consideration that I have for people like myself that are supporting would-be allies, especially for Black people, is that honestly, if we're really honest, being Black is not a sufficient resume to facilitate this conversation. Like, actually, we, again, are not a monolith. We have so many different experiences. Really, to facilitate a conversation like this, it is a talent that you develop into a skill over time. I think that you have, you know, as a Black woman, I feel like I have very important, powerful perspectives to share, insights to share with people who are interested in understanding and learning more. But, you know, we also have to be sensitive to, you know, I have to be sensitive to the fact that the experiences that I have are, you know, unique also. Like, I'm unique within a group of people who have so many different kinds of experiences. And so, you know, we just have to be really thoughtful about the way that we are facilitating conversation. I think those are, like I said, those are kind of like the main three things for people who are trying to support their friends as allies to really kind of reflect on and think about, because I know that my experiences are unique to me. I also would still encourage my friends to kind of pursue other points of view. And, I think also just these other 6 things for people to begin to think about as they're beginning this process, entering in this journey and wanting to be committed to, again, a different kind of practice for the way they live their life. I hope this is helpful.
100%. And I think that's one of my favorite things about social media is that you can see so many different narratives and you can read so many different stories, and you can really get to kind of have those conversations, even if, sometimes it's, maybe like a Facebook, friend or somebody you don't really know as well. But that is one of the nicest things, and I would love to be able to eventually like bring on different people so that we can kind of have some of those, conversations, especially people who are in 2 different, groups. And then, I have some friends that are mixed, and so they've had different issues there, maybe people who are in the Black community and also, might be gay or something like that, just because, again, their narrative is so incredibly different.
100%. And so kind of going back to that metaphor that I said about like having cancer, it would be a situation where you can have comorbidities, like you have multiple things kind of going on within one person, and there's an interaction, and it's hard to really tease out if your symptoms are resulting from one or the other or both or what it is. So,
Mimi, thank you so much for really educating me and different people. This has been so helpful. Mimi is available at, I'm going to say it the right way now, Mom Peditor. And I'm going to share her book. Yes, I said it right. I'm going to share her book in stories today. So that's available now on Amazon. I'll relink her old book. I did want to share, I watched a live last week on Facebook with 2 friends, Danny Faust and another awesome woman. And they were just kind of giving me some tips. So I've learning a little bit, but I'm still learning in so many different areas right here. And I think I would love to hear from everybody. If you have DMs on specific things you want us to cover in future weeks, I definitely would love to talk about homeschooling. I know a lot of friends of mine who have homeschooled for years have said this is more like crisis schooling. It's not truly homeschooling. Mimi has been homeschooling her oldest daughter this past year and doing some combination of that. And I know with so many of us parents with our kids going back to school in a few months and concerned about schooling looking so different, I just think this is a great time to kind of have that conversation. I, again, don't know as much about that area, but happy to help lead the conversation. I'm a host on my channel. Mimi and I are, we're wanting to do more and more of these. So I'd love any feedback, perspectives. Mimi, you're amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And again, I just really respect, and appreciate the fact that you have leveraged your platform for us to be able to have this conversation. You make yourself vulnerable so that people can actually witness your learning process, because most people don't have that kind of boldness. So nice girl.
Thanks. Bye, everybody. Hope you have a good rest of your day.
All right. Bye.